Hi, this is Murdoch's Jukebox. Let's get this on. Welcome back. I've ranked quite a couple of things on my channel, and of course, usually music fans like to talk about the things they like best. But with this video, I'll try and go a different route, namely talk about the, well, not so glorious tracks in a band's discography. Now, for those who usually argue then in comment sections, hey, why do you just focus on the negative? Well, you don't need to watch this, and secondly, I just don't believe that there is any fan who likes every single song by a given artist the same way. So even the best ones have got their bad days, and with this video, I'll take a look at the not so fabulous tracks by the Beatles. By the way, I'm just more or less recovering from a nasty little stomach infection, so if I look worse than the songs I talk about, that's why. And should I lose the plot due to health issues, I hope my little music monkey will take over and help me out. So I've done my 20 favorite Beatles songs already. And now for the bottom of the bottom, I'll just talk about the 10, my personally 10 least liked Beatles songs. Again, I surprised myself a little bit with this list. I'm not the biggest fan of the debut album by the Beatles, but lo and behold, none of the tracks of Please Please Me made it to my least favorite list. So that's quite interesting for myself. I again looked at the whole studio discography of the Beatles, including single A and B sides, but I left out any anthology, originally unreleased material or alternative takes, etc. And so this time the countdown is getting from not so good to really worst. So my number one will be my personally least liked Beatles song as of 2026. Let's go into the vault of pain. Some of the usual suspects in such worst Beatles songs lists will not feature in my list, simply because I think they are not that bad as songs. Maybe some questionable lyric lines here and there, but still passable songs. Also, let it be known that I'm not rating Revolution 9 here. I mean, I'm aware of this being Musique Concrète inspired, so this is also a kind of experimental music, but to me, Revolution 9 always has been more like a sound collage and not a real proper song, so that I'm not rating it here, even though I have to say I'm also not a big fan of Revolution 9. I can imagine that this was very far out and progressive in the late 60s to put this kind of experiment on an album, but at the end of the day, it's more like, yeah, experimentation for experimentation's sake, and I don't think it has aged very well. Also, looking at my list now, I realized that I completely forgot about that final Beatles song that was released a couple of years ago, Now and Then. And to be honest, in my opinion, this is a hot contender for being included on such lists. I think this song was just a disappointing dirge, but yeah, probably says a lot that I really forgot that this song existed. However, my list so then will focus on the Beatles' output when they were still an active band. I'll start my list at number 10 with a song of the Help album, one of the earlier George Harrison written tunes, You Like Me Too Much. Now, this song has one interesting feature, and that is the e-piano playing by John Lennon with quite interesting chords actually, but the song as such is a strangely moody affair in terms of lyrics by Harrison, and overall simply is not up to par with the material that the Beatles came up with in the mid 60s. Overall, it's not really an absolutely bad song, but just simply a little bit bland, and one of those tunes that could arguably be called a little bit forgettable among the Fab Four songs.
You'll never leave me, and you know it's true, 'cause you like me too much and I like you.
Next up in my flop 10 is one of the big Paul McCartney ballads, and arguably the reason why this is featured as number 9 in my worst of the Beatles list also is the terrible production work that was done by Phil Spector for this one. A song from the Let It Be album, and I'm referring here, of course, to the officially released studio album version, The Long and Winding Road. Now, I know quite a lot of Beatles fans really like this song and say it's a sentimental, heartfelt ballad, beautiful tune. I never liked it. I think it's incredibly sappy. And of course, the orchestration, the over-the-top orchestration still adds, more injuries to an already rather intolerable song. Of course, the Let It Be Naked version sort of redeems this tune, but even in the stripped down version, this is certainly not one of my favorite Paul McCartney moments. I also feel that this song always, drags on endlessly. The Long and Winding Road for me is just a long and winding listen. My number 9 in the flop 10.
The long and winding road that leads to your door.
Number 8, I'm sorry to say, is the first self-penned tune by Ringo Starr, released on The Beatles, better known as The White Album, in 1968, though the roots of this song go back as far as 1962. So Ringo was dabbling with a bit of songwriting here and there, but the song only got, finalized for the White Album sessions. Don't Pass Me By, a kind of country southern rock stomper, very simplistic melody, and a honky-tonk or country and western violin that really makes my toes curl. I think that the arrangement or the overall performance on the song is very chaotic and unpleasant to listen to. It's just my opinion. I really don't like the song. It sounds like the first song somebody has written with some not so wise arrangement choices thrown in. Nonetheless, apparently this one got to number 1 in Denmark because it was released as a single in Scandinavia.
Don't pass me by, don't make me cry, don't make me blue.
Going further down the list, up next is a John Lennon song from the A Hard Day's Night album. When I Get Home, there's hardly anything I can say about this song. It's typical beat music of the time, not very memorable. There's nothing that really stands out on this track. And yeah, this for me is a typical example of filler material.
Got a whole lot of things to tell her when I get home. Come on, on my way.
And speaking of filler material, that certainly holds true for my number 6 in the Flop 10 list. A cover version and also a medley released on The Beatles for Sale, an album from a time when the Fab Four really were running low on fuel and creative juices, also were under time pressure and exhausted from the touring and the whole showbiz treadmill. And it shows, especially on this cover version, Kansas City, popularized by Little Richard. Famously, Paul McCartney is a huge Little Richard fan. And also Hey Hey Hey, which immediately follows in this medley, was a Little Richard B-side. The Beatles dove deeply back into their material that they played live in Hamburg and in the Cavern Club for the Beatles for Sale album, simply to fill the album. And one can tell that compared to the originals that you find on the Beatles for Sale, the Beatles actually were somewhere else in terms of musical style and also the level of songwriting than those blues and rock and roll standards that they covered. And yeah, this is not a very interesting cover version, to be honest. That relentless Hey 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 by Paul McCartney tends to get on my nerves a little bit. So yeah, I could have picked quite a number of cover versions that the Beatles recorded, but this one is especially uninteresting.
Hey, 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 baby. Hey, baby. Oh, now, girl.
At number 5, another John Lennon number from the early years. This one features on With the Beatles, or for American listeners, Meet the Beatles. It's the song Not a Second Time. Another of those, I don't know, a bit throwaway-ish, soul-influenced beat numbers. Again, nothing to really write home about, not exactly memorable. A song that I would listen to a second time, but to be honest, it just passes you by when it's playing without leaving any big impression.
No, 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 not a second time.
Okay, now we're getting to the really lousy ones, already down to number 4. You can tell I want to get these quickly off my chest, maybe. Yeah, poor old Beatles for Sale, but it's another track of that often rightfully maligned album. It has its strong spots, but this song certainly doesn't belong to those. It's another cover version, this time sung by Ringo. The track Honey Don't, originally by Carl Perkins. It was the B-side to Blue Suede Shoes. And yeah, you can tell Ringo Starr is in his element. I mean, he was a fan of country and Western music. And probably the Beatles thought it was cool to sort of, take a bow before those American country idols. It's just fluffy filler material for me to go, Ringo, don't. Yeah, in my opinion, the Beatles just shouldn't have tried to play this kind of country, or more precisely honky-tonk rockabilly style. It just comes across as a pale imitation in the end.
Well, honey, don't. Well, honey, don't. Honey, don't.
Yeah, and I didn't have to prepare a lot for my number 3 because we stick to the same composer and the same album, yet another Carl Perkins number, Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby. A track this time sung by George Harrison in the Beatles version. And yeah, it's another attempt at creating a kind of rockabilly country sound. And this time around, as much as I love George, especially as an individual songwriter, I think his voice is grating a little bit on this track. And yeah, the Beatles just don't get the sound right. Also, the guitar solo or the little guitar interlude in this track really is nothing to be proud of, I'm afraid to say. So yeah, maybe I'm just not a fan of Carl Perkins. Anyways, that's my number 3 of worst or least liked Beatles recordings.
Everybody's trying to be my baby. Everybody's trying to be my baby. Everybody's trying to be my baby now.
So number two, you probably are wondering what can be worse than what this guy has already presented us with. And where are the usual suspects? No Wild Honey Pie or Little Child? No. My number 2 is a track that actually features in the first full-length Beatles movie, A Hard Day's Night. And as much as I love the movie, and as much as I actually love that album, this song just doesn't cut it. It's the song I'm Happy Just to Dance With You. And yeah, oftentimes Lennon and McCartney have been, accused a little bit of writing weaker songs and then give them to either Ringo or George Harrison in the early years of the Beatles. And I think with this track, the accusations really hold true. This is just such a, by the numbers track on which, even though he keeps singing I'm Happy Just to Dance With You, George Harrison simply sounds bored and miserable. And the strange tom beats that come in the arrangement here and there are rather irritating than elevating. I have the feeling that this maybe is a bit of a case of underdealing their own song, or maybe not taking enough time to, polish the song in the studio. It seems to have been knocked out pretty quickly or a bit listlessly. I don't know. Yeah. I don't really like this song. It's a sore thumb in the Hard Day's Night soundtrack, in my opinion. But brace yourselves for my number 1, which in this case, of course, is the worst Beatles song.
There is really nothing else I'd rather do, 'cause I'm happy just to dance with you. I don't need to hug or hold you tight.
In their defense, this song also wasn't written by the Beatles themselves. But other than that, there's nothing to defend this recording. I'm talking about the one and only
Mr. Moonlight.
Yeah, this is a very, very odd choice for a cover version. Again, the Beatles looked back at the material they played to fill their long evenings at the Cavern Club and for some reason chose this one. Apparently John Lennon really liked performing it, but his vocal performance is somewhere between really substandard and completely over the top at the same time. I don't know how he does it, but that's the way it sounds. This originally used to be a kind of rhythm and blues number, but in the Beatles version, it rather sounds like a really cheesy novelty song or pop ballad for a cheesy movie, maybe. To add insult to injury, Paul McCartney also plays a very cheesy organ in the background. So either the Beatles really had a bad taste day when they recorded this, or this was from the very get-go meant to be a novelty number, just to, as a piss take, basically. It's really hard to listen to.
And now she is mine. I think you're fine, 'cause we love you, Mr. Moonlight.
We made it through the list. At least I did. I don't know how many of you viewers angrily stopped the video after my number 10. Probably I'll be losing a number of subscribers now, which doesn't worry me, because in order to unsubscribe, you need to subscribe in the first place, and I know that I hardly have any subscribers, so I'm going easy with that. Thanks for watching, if you made it to the end, and join me again, maybe, when I will be talking about probably something completely different in the next video for the next Murdoch Music Minute. And of course, don't forget to let me know your least favorite Beatles tracks, if you dare. Thanks and see you.